So in the last video, I showed you guys my Macintosh SE, which I had just recently completed the MacFX case swap on and also put a blue SCSI in. Anyways, that was the last video, and while that stuff was going down, I actually picked up the SE a friend. As you can see over here. Let's check this guy out, shall we? So this, my friends, is a Macintosh Plus, and this was the third Macintosh to ever be released after the original one with 128K of RAM and the 512K that released shortly after that. In 1986, they came out with the Plus, and it had a couple of noteworthy features, notably an external SCSI bus and expandable memory up to 4 megabytes. So that was pretty cool. It does, sorry, I can't English today. It does retain the original case design, unlike the SE and later, which kind of rehashed the casing a little bit. But anyways, I picked this up from my good friend Chris, who you all should know by now, and there's actually kind of a little bit of a story. About 5 years ago, him and I actually drove a couple hundred miles away to get a lot of vintage Macs and other Apple accessories and stuff, mostly from the 80s and 90s. And this Mac Plus had been sitting in his garage ever since. And since he kind of noticed, or encouraged me rather, to get into compact Macs a little bit more lately, he decided to gift me this machine because, you know, it was just sitting around and he knows I like these things. So anyhow, that's how I got this thing. It was untested at the time. He opened it up just to inspect everything, and he said everything looked good. And he also pulled the RAM and the floppy drive out of it to see if those worked, and they both did. But he did not try to power on the machine at all. He just handed it over to me. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But first off, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a tour of the condition of this machine, because it actually is in pretty darn good shape. So here it is. As you can see, it doesn't have any significant exterior damage, and also the casing is actually not too yellowed, which is pretty cool. Now, these Mac Pluses came in two colors, and originally they came in the kind of Pantone beige color. Think about like this mouse, for example. You can see how beige that is compared to the actual machine. But in 1987, they changed it to their long-lived Snow White, kind of like off gray color, and of course it's a bit more yellow than it was brand new, but it actually is in quite good shape, like I mentioned. Now, if we're going around the machine, you might notice that there is a little bit of switch down here, and that is actually what is called the reset interrupt switch, or the programmer's key. It is basically just a switch that snaps onto the side of the computer, and it sticks into two little buttons on the logic board for an interrupt and a reset button. And this is actually pretty nice because sometimes, especially on my SE, I have software that locks up the machine, and you normally would have to go back there and just flip the power switch. But with this, you can just hit the reset and it will automatically restart, which is nice. I actually did order one of those for my SE, but it was cool to see that this machine already had one with it. Now, that is pretty cool. Of course, from the front, you can see we have Macintosh Plus branding and, of course, a 800K floppy drive. And then down here, we have the telephone cord style keyboard connector. The SE was the first Mac to use ADB, so we still had your serial connection for the mouse and that telephone cord style connector for the keyboard. Going along the top, you can see we have some ventilation. This is an entirely passively cooled Macintosh. The SE was also the first to have an internal cooling fan, which caused a bunch of problems, which we'll talk about later. But the only thing they had on this machine was just some vents on top to kind of disperse heat. Now, if we turn it, you can see, let's go around to this side. Again, no visible extreme damage or anything like that, so that was cool. And then we can go ahead and turn around to the back. And yeah, same story back here. Now, originally, of course, this machine did come with 1 megabyte of RAM, but someone has already been in here and they did upgrade it to the maximum 4 megabytes, so that was nice to see. Now, if we go up here, you can see here we have a slot for a PRAM battery. Now, I believe this is a discontinued battery size. I'm not exactly sure what size it is, but it is a 4.5 volt battery, as you might be able to read there. Now, of course, being a vintage Mac, you know, you kind of want to pull all these batteries out because, especially with the ones that are on the actual logic board, they can leak and explode and cause a lot of damage. So, anyways, that would be where the PRAM battery would go. And of course, we have our power switch and IEC connection there for our AC power. And then down here we have a headphone jack, the mouse connection, a floppy drive connection, and a external SCSI bus, a DB25. So that is nice to have. Like I said, the Plus was the first Mac with external SCSI. Of course, there is no internal SCSI still, so you still could not put an internal hard drive in this machine. And then we have a printer and a telephone port. I'm not exactly sure what ports these are. But I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me. So if we go ahead and put the camera back on the tripod and flip the machine around, actually, you know what? I do want to show you guys the bottom because there is something cool on there too. Now I'm going to carefully lay this machine on the side, and we will take a look at this. So you can see there is an original Mac Plus Apple Care sticker back from 1992, and this machine was sold, I believe, in 1987. I believe it was manufactured. So I'm not sure if they were doing 5-year Apple Care back then, or they may have purchased this as like a refurb machine. But there you go. I thought that was a cool little relic from, 20 years ago. So that was kind of nice to see. Anyways, I'm gonna put the camera back on the tripod for this part, and we'll talk about getting it working. So if I carefully put the machine back on its face, right side up there. So like I said, when Chris gave me this machine, he was not sure if it worked, and of course it did not. And when I tried to plug it into power and turn it on, this is what happened. So, a common problem on these, due to the lack of a cooling fan, is they generate quite a bit of heat, and this causes the solder joints on the analog board to crack after a while, just from the excess heat, and this can cause problems like I just had. So, I actually had some help from a guy on Facebook. His name is actually Thomas Andrews. He runs a company called Amiga of Rochester out of New York, and he actually specializes in repairing these retro computers, the Macintosh, Amiga, and probably several other vintage computers. And so he actually kind of walked me through how to reflow the solder joints on the analog board. And so after completing that, this machine started working. It, of course, I found quite a few bad cracked solder joints on the board, so after reflowing all of those, this machine now works absolutely perfectly. So, with that said, I'll go ahead and demonstrate that, but first I would like to also give a shout out to Blue SCSI, because this is an external model, so they make two different ones. I have the internal variation in my SE, but this is a external edition, or external model that plugs into a DB25. Now, to use this with a Mac Plus, this does not have termination power at the SCSI port, so you're going to have to power it, but there's a little micro USB connector on there that we'll use, and that will work just fine. So, without further ado, I'm going to back the camera up just a little bit, and I will go ahead and connect everything that we need to power this Macintosh Plus up. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and power the machine on for you guys. Now it's interesting, unlike my SE, of course, this does not make any noise whatsoever while it's on. So it's a little bit funny. But as you can see, the screen is coming up now, and with very shortly, with any luck, we should see a happy Mac, and we'll boot into System 6. And there we go. We are on the System 6 desktop, booted off the Blue SCSI. So, I'm going to go ahead and shut this light off for this part, and I will zoom in a little bit on the screen so we can see what we need to see. There we go. How about that? So, first thing I got to do is go into the control panel and set the mouse to where I need it to be, because it defaults to the slowest setting, unfortunately. I'm sure there is a utility that will help me with that, but you know, it is what it is. Then we're going to go into applications and we'll go to our PRAM settings here. And we'll go ahead and go Command T to set the time, or the date rather, which is the most important part. Today's January 25th, 2022. And then we really don't care too much about the time, but it's 7:56. And actually it needs to be military time, so that should be 1956. There we go. So we'll quit that. Then we'll go back into our applications here. And I will demonstrate some apps. So I think the first one I will do is Mac Pong, because who doesn't love a good game of Pong? So as you can see, it plays Pong pretty well. Whoops. Got me. Anyhow, you get the idea. Let's go ahead and quit. So it does play Pong pretty well. Of course, that's about all it can play, because these older Macs don't have a lot of horsepower, so they can't run a lot of newer, cooler Mac games, but you know, the simple ones are neat. Go ahead and try out Connect 4. And the computer kicks my ass on this game. I must suck at Connect 4 or something, because this thing is just beating me every single time. As you can see, it kicked my ass yet again. But there you go. And that's really all I have on here. I also have Super Paint, but you know, I'm not going to sit here and draw a painting for you guys, but that's pretty much it. Otherwise, this is a pretty clean install of System 6. But I'll go ahead and go into about this Mac to finish off the video, where you can see that it does actually have 4 megabytes of RAM. So that was nice. That was a nice surprise to see that it was already maxed out. It's less work on my part. But anyways, that is my Macintosh Plus, the second compact Mac in my collection. So, without further ado, I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video. And you can also see my 2006 Mac Pro over here that I am using as a bridge Mac to download software and interface with the SD cards for these things, because using a modern machine is possible, but it's a little bit less convenient. So it's nicer to have just an older Mac that's dedicated to interfacing with these machines, like I said. But without further ado, thank you guys for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next one.